He called me useless, and I believed him for too long. I remember the exact moment I felt my world tilt. I was in the kitchen, my hands sticky with glue from the little DIY organizer I had been crafting for our cluttered pantry, and he leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, a smirk playing on his lips. "Why do you even bother with this? You're just wasting your time," he said. His words were soft, almost casual, but they cut sharper than any raised voice. I froze, glue tube in hand, staring at him as if my eyes could erase the sting. I wanted to argue, to tell him it was just a small project, harmless, but the tremor in my voice betrayed me. It helps keep things neat," I mumbled, barely loud enough for him to hear. He shook his head. "Neat? Come on, Jane. You're not going to make money with this little hobby. Maybe you should try something that actually matters." And just like that, the weight of years pressed down on me. Years of trying, failing, hoping he'd see me, not just my hands busy with glue and paint, but me, my mind, my worth. I had always loved creating, even before we married. Simple things, a homemade shelf, a personalized card, a clever kitchen hack. Nothing fancy, nothing that would make a boardroom take notice. Just little bursts of pride, little sparks of life I could call my own. But in his eyes, it was always nothing. I put the glue down, my fingers trembling. The smell of the adhesive mixed with the faint aroma of burnt toast from breakfast. Two small reminders that I was trying and failing at the same time. I smiled weakly, the kind of smile that says, "I'll just keep quiet. I'll clean it up," I whispered, my voice so small I hardly recognized it as mine. He didn't reply. He walked past me, leaving a faint trail of his cologne in the air, warm, sharp, authoritative. The sound of his footsteps faded into the living room, and for a moment, I let myself believe he might not notice if I cried. Just a moment. That was the beginning of many such mornings. Every project, every small attempt to make something of my hands or mind, was met with a smirk, a dismissive word, or outright mockery. And each time, a little piece of me shrank. Life with Tom had started with dreams. We were young, full of energy, full of promises we whispered in dimly lit apartments and car rides home after long workdays. He was ambitious, confident, and I was creative. I loved imagining, making, and fixing. I thought we balanced each other. But somewhere along the way, balance became inequality, and encouragement turned into criticism. Our mornings were always rushed. The clatter of coffee cups, the hum of the toaster, the ticking of the old wall clock, my ears tuned into these small symphonies. He would check his phone obsessively, muttering about meetings and deadlines, while I tried to tidy up, fix a leak in the sink, or start a small project for myself. He never noticed the little victories. The organized pantry, the freshly painted shelf, the new curtains I had sewn from scraps. Nothing mattered. I had given up asking for approval long ago. Instead, I worked silently, finding solace in the quiet moments where my creativity still mattered to me, if not to him. I sewed, I painted, I invented little things, small hacks that I thought were clever. But every time I proudly showed him, hoping for even a flicker of interest, he would shrug. "Cute," he'd say. "But useless. Useless." The word settled into my skin like a cold draft. It wasn't just the projects. It was everything. If I suggested a dinner plan, he dismissed it. If I tried to save money with a clever coupon or hack, it was ignored. If I dreamed about starting something of my own, he laughed, just a little chuckle, like I had told a bad joke. Over the years, the laughter became a constant background noise in my life, a reminder that my ideas were trivial, my thoughts unworthy, and my ambition laughable. And yet, despite all that, I stayed. I stayed because of the history we had, the shared memories, the quiet hope that one day he might see me. That one day, he might say, "You're more than I ever realized." But that day never came. Then came the spark, the little idea that changed everything. It started with a simple problem. My kitchen was a mess. Drawers overflowing, utensils scattered, lids lost under stacks of pots. I wanted something that would hold everything neatly, compactly, elegantly. So, one night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat at the kitchen table with paper, pencil, and scraps of wood from old furniture. I sketched, I measured, I cut, and I hammered. The smell of sawdust filled the air, mixed with the faint sweetness of leftover pie cooling on the counter. It was quiet, productive. I felt alive. The first prototype wasn't perfect, far from it. A drawer caught on a hinge, a shelf wobbled, but it worked. I tested it, adjusted it, improved it. I felt a thrill I hadn't felt in years. I made something that mattered to me. I showed Tom. He leaned over, glanced once, and laughed. "Jane, why are you still doing this? You could be doing something useful." I nodded, a tight smile on my face, and went back to tinkering in silence. I didn't need his approval. Not anymore. And little did I know, someone else would see my work differently. Months passed. I kept improving the design, documenting, sketching, and testing. Nights blurred into mornings, weekends disappeared into the hum of creativity. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, my life outside of his shadow grew. I started sharing my idea online, in DIY forums, with small businesses. And then, one day, a message arrived that made my heart stop. A major company wanted to buy my design. Not just license it, buy it. They saw the potential, the ingenuity, the simplicity that made life easier. And just like that, my little project, the thing he mocked as useless, was about to change my life forever. And there it was, the moment when I realized the power of being seen, by someone who mattered, by someone who truly valued my work. Tom would never know the hours I had poured into it, the nights spent listening to my own heartbeat, wondering if I was chasing a foolish dream. But soon, he would see. Not the person I used to be, the shrinking, doubting wife, but a woman who had built something of real worth with her own hands and mind. The days after the company's inquiry felt surreal. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of lukewarm coffee in my hands, staring at the email on my laptop as if it were a mirage. My hands shook, not with fear, but with a strange, electric excitement. For years, I had been invisible in my own home, reduced to a label, useless, trivial, unimportant. And now, someone out there actually saw me. They saw the hours of labor, the ingenuity, the passion that I had nurtured quietly, hidden from the world. I didn't tell Tom right away. I couldn't. The thought of him mocking it, belittling my success before it even existed, made my stomach churn. Instead, I quietly continued refining my design, sending emails, arranging calls. Each day, I felt more alive, more like the woman I had always wanted to be. But, of course, Tom noticed something was different. He began to hover. It was subtle at first. A question here, a glance there. "You've been working on that thing a lot lately," he remarked one evening, leaning against the doorway with his arms crossed, the same pose he used when he was about to criticize. "You really think this is going somewhere?" I didn't answer immediately. I just smiled faintly, a smile that was calm, controlled, almost serene. "I think it might," I said softly. He raised an eyebrow, the smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. Well, good for you, I guess. Just, don't get your hopes up." It was the same tone he'd used countless times over the years, patronizing, dismissive, like he was humoring a child. And yet, something in his gaze had changed. There was a flicker of curiosity, maybe even a hint of worry. I couldn't tell if it was excitement or fear that colored his eyes. Perhaps both. The first clue that things were shifting didn't come from him, it came from me. I was on the phone with the company representative, a cheerful woman named Lisa, going over the details of a potential contract. My voice was steady, confident, professional. Every word I spoke seemed to solidify the path I had been walking alone for so long. I felt capable, intelligent, important. And then, as I hung up, I realized something. I was smiling. Not the small, hesitant smile I used to reserve for polite company, but a full, wide smile that came from deep inside. Tom had been standing behind me, silent, watching. When he spoke, his voice was low, almost cautious. "So, they actually want to buy it?" "Yes," I said, keeping my tone measured. "They're very serious." For a moment, he said nothing. And then he let out a slow whistle, shaking his head. "Wow. I didn't think. I mean, good for you." I felt a flicker of satisfaction but also a strange sadness. His words were hollow, delayed, almost apologetic. But I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Over the next few weeks, the tension in the house grew. He was polite, almost excessively so, asking questions about deadlines, meetings, and progress. I answered each one, careful, detached, letting the shift in our dynamic grow naturally. It was as if a door had opened, but he wasn't allowed in. I was still me, quiet, creative, overlooked, but now, armed with validation from the outside world. And he could see it. One evening, he lingered in the living room, pretending to read a magazine while clearly eavesdropping on my phone call with the company. I could hear him shifting in his chair, the faint creak echoing in the otherwise silent room. After I hung up, he cleared his throat. "You know, if this goes through, maybe I could help somehow?" I raised an eyebrow. "Help?" He nodded, looking sheepish. "I mean, logistics, contacts, marketing." "I could," he trailed off. I smiled, gentle but firm, a smile that said, "I've been waiting years for this, and it's mine." "Thank you, but I've got it covered," I said softly. His jaw tightened, and he looked away. I caught the subtle flicker of frustration, anger mixed with regret, but I didn't let it touch me. I had spent too many years shrinking myself to fit his expectations. No more. Then came the first real confrontation, though he didn't call it that. One Saturday afternoon, I was putting the finishing touches on the latest prototype when he appeared in the doorway, holding a cup of coffee. "You know, I've been thinking," he began, careful, measured. "Maybe I was wrong about everything." I looked up, my hand still working, my heart steady. "About what?" "About you. About your potential," he said, trying to sound casual, but failing. His voice carried the weight of years of regret. I didn't see it. I thought you weren't capable of anything worthwhile." I set down my tools slowly, my fingers brushing over the smooth surface of the wood. "And now?" I asked. "Now. I see it." "I see you," he admitted, his gaze heavy. "I can't help but wonder if I messed up." I swallowed, feeling a wave of emotions crash over me, anger, pity, satisfaction. But mostly, a quiet calm. I realized that his apology, though long overdue, was no longer necessary. My validation didn't need him. My success didn't require his approval. "I appreciate that you see me now," I said, voice soft, controlled. "But that doesn't change the past." He looked down, silent. The coffee cup trembled in his hand, and I realized he understood, in that moment, that some doors, once closed, cannot be reopened at the same level of intimacy. That night, I lay awake, thinking about the months ahead. The company was finalizing the contract. My design, once dismissed as trivial, was about to become a product that would reach homes everywhere. I was about to step into a life I had only dreamed of, independent, validated, free. And Tom, well, he had finally seen me. But seeing me now, at my best, my strongest, was too late. The first clue, the subtle change in his behavior, had led to this moment. And I had learned something vital: recognition from someone who belittled you for years doesn't define your worth. You do. I closed my eyes and breathed in the familiar smells of the house, vanilla from the candle on the counter, the faint tang of glue and wood from the projects scattered around me. I felt a warmth, a deep contentment that I had never experienced before. For the first time in years, I felt fully myself. It was a quiet Tuesday when the first real storm hit. I had returned from a meeting with the company representatives, my mind buzzing with numbers, contracts, and the possibilities of what was to come. The sun was dipping low, casting warm golden light across the living room, and for a moment, everything felt right. Then Tom spoke. "Jane, we need to talk." His voice was low, hesitant, but carried the weight of years I knew all too well. My chest tightened. That tone, soft, almost cautious, was usually a warning of trouble to come. I set my bag down, brushing my hands over my jeans. "About what?" I asked, calm, measured, though a flicker of dread ran through me. He hesitated, biting his lower lip, a small tell I had memorized over years of marriage. I just. I know you're busy, and, well, I might have made a mistake. I tilted my head, sensing the familiar rhythm of deception. A mistake? I prompted. He ran a hand through his hair. I sold the house. The words hit me like ice water. I froze mid-step, the echo of the phrase bouncing in my skull. You sold the house? When? Why? While you were at your meeting yesterday, he admitted, voice tight. I thought it would be easier for both of us. But now, I see. I cut him off. You what? You didn't even discuss this with me? My voice was rising, though I tried to steady it. The scent of the coffee he had left on the counter wafted past me, mingling with the faint odor of sawdust from my recent prototype. I felt a strange surge of betrayal and clarity all at once. I thought it was for the best, he said, eyes pleading. I didn't want to argue, Anne. I didn't think you'd mind. I laughed, a hollow, bitter sound that surprised even me. You didn't think I'd mind? Tom, that's our home, the one we built together. You can't just sell it while I'm working to build something of my own. He flinched. I just don't. Just don't, I snapped, my fingers gripping the edge of the counter until my knuckles whitened. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to feel the raw heat of anger, the sting of disbelief, and the bitter taste of betrayal all at once. He looked at me, shame mixing with frustration. Save it, I said sharply. You've said enough. I walked past him, the hardwood floor cool beneath my feet, the golden light casting long shadows of both of us across the living room. In that moment, I realized how little he had understood me all these years. Not my dreams, not my ideas, not my worth. Everything I had built in silence, he had taken for granted. And yet, I didn't cry. Not this time. Not after years of being diminished and dismissed. That night, I sat at my desk, the smell of sawdust and wood glue lingering in the air, and made a decision. I would finish my design. I would sign the contract. I would step into a life that no longer depended on his validation or his presence. And I would do it quietly, with grace, letting the results speak for themselves. The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork, prototypes, and late-night calls. The company representatives were professional and enthusiastic, and with each signed document, each finalized detail, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I wasn't just making something, they were giving me the recognition I deserved. Tom tried to involve himself, offering helpful suggestions, asking questions he had no answers to. I listened politely, smiled, nodded, but kept control firmly in my hands. Each attempt he made to reinsert himself into my process reminded me of the years I had spent shrinking to fit his expectations. And I refused to shrink any longer. Then came the day of the official announcement. The company flew me to their headquarters for the press event, where I would officially unveil the design. It was surreal, standing in front of cameras, executives, and journalists, explaining the inspiration behind my invention, the hours of labor, the late nights of trial and error. Every word I spoke carried confidence, poise, and pride. I could feel the energy in the room shift. People listened. They saw me. Meanwhile, Tom watched from a seat at the back, pale, fidgeting, trying to hide his disbelief as reporters asked about the impact of my work. Jane, this is incredible, the CEO said afterward, shaking my hand warmly. We're thrilled to have this in the market. You've created something remarkable. I smiled, letting the genuine praise wash over me. For once, it wasn't tinged with condescension or dismissal. For once, I wasn't invisible. Tom lingered behind as the crowd dispersed. Jane. I held up a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. Tom. You don't get to define my worth anymore. My voice was calm, deliberate, a quiet storm of power. I've earned this. Every ounce of it. And I didn't need you to see it to get here. He opened his mouth, but I didn't let him continue. I turned away, letting the murmur of applause, the flashing cameras, and the hum of excited conversation fill the space that had once been occupied by doubt and fear. I had moved beyond him. And yet, the betrayal stung. I realized it wasn't just the house, or the years of belittling, it was the years I had allowed his words to define me. The years I doubted myself, questioned my abilities, and silently endured. But standing there, amid the hum of recognition and achievement, I felt something profound. I was free. The first time I truly smiled that day, it wasn't polite. It wasn't hesitant. It was whole. I was finally living the life I had imagined in secret, the life that belonged entirely to me. Tom's regret was tangible, a shadow trailing him wherever he went. But I didn't chase it. I didn't need to. For the first time in years, I understood the power of being seen, not by him, not by anyone who had doubted me, but by myself. And that realization was everything. I returned home from the company headquarters that evening with a sense of lightness I hadn't felt in years. The house, once heavy with resentment and quiet tension, now felt almost alien. Tom was there, pretending casual interest in the mail on the counter, but I saw through it immediately. He was trying to act normal, to mask the regret he could no longer hide. I set my bag down, carefully arranging my papers, prototypes, and notes on the table. Each object was a small monument to the hours I had devoted to this project, a tangible reminder that I had built something of real value. Tom watched, his eyes tracking my movements like a bird circling a nest. "You know," he began slowly, as if testing the waters, maybe we should talk about the future." I didn't look up immediately. I kept my hands busy, stacking papers neatly, my mind racing. This was it, the moment he had been waiting for, the moment he thought he could step back into my life now that I had proven him wrong. But the truth was, I had no intention of letting him back in as though nothing had happened. "Talk about the future?" I echoed, voice calm, almost curious. "Which future are you referring to, Tom? Yours? Mine? Or the one we used to have that you threw away?" His shoulders stiffened. I made mistakes. But we can fix things." I finally met his gaze, steady and unwavering. "We can fix things, Tom. But fixing things doesn't mean going back to how it was. I've changed. You've changed. And what we had, it's over. For good." He opened his mouth, but I didn't give him a chance. I had already started planning how I would assert my independence, not just emotionally, but practically. The first step was financial control. I had already secured the contract with the company, but I needed to make sure every dollar, every transaction, was protected. I met with a financial advisor and a lawyer to establish separate accounts, trust structures, and a clear legal framework that would keep my assets mine. It wasn't about revenge, it was about safeguarding the life I had built with my own hands. Tom, of course, noticed. "Do you really need all this legal stuff?" he asked one evening, his voice a mix of incredulity and desperation. "Yes," I said simply. "Because unlike you, I plan ahead. Unlike you, I think about consequences." I could see the frustration ripple across his face. For the first time, he realized that the woman he had dismissed as useless was now untouchable in ways he couldn't control. Next came the public consequence of his behavior. Not through confrontation, not through shouting or shame, but through quiet demonstration of my capabilities. I continued to attend industry events, speaking confidently about my invention, networking, and building relationships that would secure my reputation. At the same time, I made sure my story, the journey from dismissal to success, was documented online in forums, social media, and interviews. I didn't speak ill of Tom, I didn't need to. I simply told the truth, the challenges, the disbelief, the hard work, and the eventual triumph. The reaction was immediate. Messages poured in from women who had been in my position, husbands or partners who had doubted them, colleagues who hadn't believed in their ideas. They shared their stories, their gratitude, and their admiration. And through it all, I realized something essential: my success wasn't about humiliating him. It was about empowering myself, and others like me. Tom's attempts to insert himself grew more desperate. He would comment on meetings, offer unsolicited advice, and even hint at helping me expand my business. But I maintained the calm, collected demeanor I had cultivated over months of preparation. Every time he tried to assert influence, I politely, firmly, and professionally redirected the situation. "You know, Tom," I said during one particularly tense dinner, "your advice is noted. But I have a team managing that now. I don't need anyone undermining the work we've already done." He flinched, and for the first time I saw genuine fear, or at least a fear of being irrelevant. It was a quiet triumph, subtle, dignified, but immensely satisfying. And then the final step, moving on emotionally. I had allowed years of belittling to erode my self-esteem, and I knew that the real victory wasn't in financial independence or public recognition, it was in reclaiming my inner strength. I began small. I decorated the house according to my taste, painting walls in colors I loved, placing objects I cherished in places of prominence. I spent evenings not revising prototypes or answering emails, but reading, cooking, and enjoying the quiet comfort of my own choices. I reconnected with friends I had drifted from during years of quiet survival. Women who had faced similar doubts, men who had supported me without judgment, and mentors who recognized the potential in my work. I discovered a community, a network of encouragement and inspiration I hadn't realized I was missing. And slowly, Tom's presence became irrelevant. Not because I hated him, not because I sought revenge, but because I no longer needed him to define my life. One evening, as I stood in the kitchen, inhaling the faint scent of fresh-baked bread and the lingering smell of wood polish from my latest project, I realized something profound. I had lived years thinking my worth depended on someone else's approval. And now, for the first time, I knew my worth depended solely on my own vision, my own efforts, and my own heart. Tom watched quietly from the doorway. "Jane." "I never realized," he began. I turned, smiling gently but firmly. "You realized, Tom. But realization doesn't undo the past. It doesn't rebuild the years of belittling. And that's okay. I'm not bitter, I'm free." And in that freedom I found peace, purpose, and a clarity I had never experienced before. The announcement went viral. Not because it was flashy or sensational, but because it was real. A woman, long dismissed, long belittled, had created something that genuinely improved lives, and she had done it on her own. I woke up that morning to notifications, messages, and emails flooding in. People wanted to know my story, the journey from the kitchen table to corporate boardrooms. They were inspired by the hours I had poured into a useless idea, by the patience I had cultivated, and by the way I had transformed silent mockery into tangible success. Tom, of course, noticed first. He came into the kitchen, the sun highlighting the worry lines on his face. "Jane, people are talking about you," he said, voice low. This is everywhere." I nodded, stirring my coffee slowly, deliberately. "I know. It's been overwhelming, but wonderful. People are responding positively. That's what matters." He swallowed hard, the weight of realization pressing down. I can't believe I didn't see it before. You were amazing all along, and I was blind." I didn't respond immediately. There was a time when hearing this would have made my heart ache, longing for acknowledgement. But those days were gone. I simply sipped my coffee, letting the silence speak. He understood, I think, that words alone couldn't repair the years he had dismissed me. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of interviews, public appearances, and product testing. Each event was another layer of recognition, another chance to assert myself in a world that had finally seen what I was capable of. And Tom? He became a quiet observer, slowly realizing that his window of influence had closed. He was polite, sometimes awkwardly helpful, but he no longer commanded the space he once occupied. One morning, as I prepared for a regional business expo, he approached me in the kitchen. "Jane, I just want you to know. I regret everything. Selling the house, doubting you, it was wrong. I looked at him, calm, composed, my hands resting on the counter. Regret doesn't undo the past, Tom. It doesn't rebuild trust. And it doesn't give you a place in my life the way it used to. He nodded slowly, a mixture of shame and acceptance in his eyes. I understand. I wish things had been different. So do I replied softly. But wishing doesn't change reality. And reality right now is that I've built a life I'm proud of, without needing approval from someone who couldn't see me. The public consequences extended beyond personal recognition. The story of my invention inspired articles, social media posts, and interviews highlighting the challenges women face when their ideas are dismissed. Suddenly, my small kitchen project became a symbol of perseverance and empowerment. I began receiving letters and emails from women who had experienced similar belittlement. They wrote about husbands, fathers, colleagues, and friends who doubted them, tried to control them, or dismissed their ambitions. Each message was a reminder that my journey was not just my own, it was part of a larger narrative of resilience. I shared my story publicly, carefully, emphasizing not revenge but growth. I didn't speak ill of Tom, I simply told the truth, the years of doubt, the mockery, the perseverance, and ultimately, the triumph. And in doing so, I found that my story had power to inspire, to uplift, and to validate those who had been silenced for too long. Tom tried, in small ways, to reinsert himself into my life. Invitations to meetings, casual questions about my business, even offers to help with logistics. Each time, I met him with calm, polite boundaries. I never shouted, I never embarrassed him. I simply demonstrated competence, independence, and dignity. You don't need me, he admitted one evening, finally recognizing what I had known for months. I don't, I said gently. And that's the beauty of it. For the first time in years, I felt nothing but peace. The tension that had lived in our home for so long had dissolved. My life was no longer defined by his opinions, his mockery, or his absence of belief. It was defined by me, my work, my efforts, my vision. The first time I truly felt the shift was when I hosted a workshop for young women interested in design and innovation. As I guided them through the process of creating prototypes and testing ideas, I saw the spark in their eyes, the same spark I had felt the first night I stayed up in the kitchen, alone, hammering and gluing. Tom observed quietly from the back of the room. He didn't speak, didn't intrude. And I realized, with a quiet satisfaction, that he had finally become irrelevant in the way that mattered most. He could watch, he could regret, but he could not diminish my achievements. I felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Not just for the wealth, not just for recognition, but for the freedom I had reclaimed, the ability to define myself without the shadow of someone else's doubt. That evening, as I returned home, the kitchen smelled faintly of pine from the polish I had used on the latest prototype, mingling with the scent of fresh-baked bread. The house was quiet. I sat at the table, my hands tracing the smooth edges of my work, and thought about the journey I had traveled. From belittlement to empowerment, from mockery to triumph, the path had been long and sometimes lonely. But every step had been mine. Every sleepless night, every tiny victory, every rejection, I had turned it all into fuel. And now, as the sun dipped low, casting golden light across my accomplishments, I knew this: success isn't just about money or recognition. It's about reclaiming your life, your worth, and your peace. I had done it. The weeks that followed were quieter, in a comforting, deliberate way. The whirlwind of interviews, events, and public recognition had settled into a rhythm that felt natural, even nourishing. I began to see the contours of my life clearly for the first time, spaces I could fill with my own choices, colors I could paint on the canvas of my days without hesitation. I redecorated the house to reflect me. The walls no longer carried the muted tones he had preferred, they bloomed with soft blues and warm golds. Shelves displayed my projects proudly, the small DIY organizers, the sketches, and prototypes that had been dismissed for so long. Each one was a monument to persistence, to the quiet hours of labor that no one had believed in. Tom existed in the periphery now. He lived in the same house, yes, but he no longer had influence over me. He tried, occasionally, to insert himself into conversations about the business, or my daily plans, but I responded with calm, firm boundaries. There was no drama, no yelling, just a quiet assertion of my independence. He could see what I had built, but he could not touch it, or me. The first time I truly felt the freedom I had worked toward was during a quiet evening at the kitchen table. I had baked bread, fresh and golden, the scent curling around the room. I ran my fingers along the edges of a new prototype, feeling the smooth wood under my fingertips, remembering the first night I had stayed up late, hammer in hand, glue on my fingers, convinced no one would ever notice. Now, they noticed. And more importantly, I noticed. I also reconnected with people I had drifted from over the years. Old friends, supportive colleagues, women I had mentored or been mentored by, all of them became part of my world again. I shared my journey openly, speaking at workshops, conferences, and informal gatherings, not to boast, but to show that even when people doubt you, perseverance can carve a path to your dreams. The community I built around my work became my anchor. Letters and messages arrived daily, women telling me their stories, sharing their challenges, and seeking advice. And I listened. I offered guidance, encouragement, and the assurance that they could succeed without waiting for validation from those who didn't believe in them. It struck me how much power there was in simply living authentically, in quietly proving your worth through action rather than argument. Tom's presence slowly diminished, not because I forced it, but because he realized he could no longer control the narrative. He had lost the leverage he had relied on for years. One afternoon, he quietly packed some of his belongings and moved out temporarily, citing space and clarity. I didn't argue, didn't chase him. I felt a serene relief as I closed the door behind him, the house finally echoing only with the sounds I chose, the hum of my projects, the clatter of utensils, the occasional laughter of friends visiting. I realized, in that quiet moment, the profound truth of empowerment: it isn't about vengeance. It isn't about proving someone wrong. It's about reclaiming your life, creating boundaries, and embracing your own worth. The business continued to grow, but I remained grounded. I dedicated time to developing new ideas, mentoring, and ensuring that the work reflected not just financial gain, but meaningful impact. I celebrated small victories, a successful prototype, a glowing customer review, a breakthrough idea, and I savored them deeply, knowing that every accomplishment had been born from resilience, determination, and patience. One evening, as I was closing up my workspace, I paused and inhaled the lingering scents: sawdust from the last prototype, vanilla from a candle on the counter, and the faint, comforting aroma of fresh-baked bread. I closed my eyes and let the quiet settle around me. I felt strong, capable, and, most importantly, free. No one could take that away from me, not past mistakes, not belittling words, not even regretful glances from someone who had once dismissed me. I thought about forgiveness, not in the sense of forgetting or welcoming Tom back, but in understanding. I forgave myself for years of self-doubt, for believing his words when I should have trusted my instincts. I forgave him, not for his sake, but to release the lingering hold his opinions had over me. Forgiveness became a tool for liberation, a way to solidify the life I had built with my own hands and mind. I had learned something vital: life doesn't require the approval of those who underestimate you. Validation can come from within, from the community you nurture, and from the quiet satisfaction of work well done. Months later, I hosted a small gathering for friends and collaborators at the house. Laughter echoed through the rooms, blending with the aroma of fresh food and the soft hum of conversation. We celebrated innovation, creativity, and the resilience it takes to pursue one's vision despite obstacles. Tom was not invited. I didn't need him there. I watched the interactions around me, seeing the joy, the inspiration, and the genuine connections forming. And I realized, with quiet pride, that I had built not just a successful business, but a life filled with purpose, respect, and authentic relationships. The small woman who once trembled in the doorway while her husband mocked her projects had grown into someone unrecognizable to that fear, confident, accomplished, and entirely herself. As the sun set that evening, casting golden light across the kitchen where my earliest prototypes still stood proudly on shelves, I felt a deep sense of closure. Life, I realized, is not about proving people wrong, it's about proving yourself right. It's about tending to your talents, nurturing your passions, and refusing to let the doubts of others dictate your worth. I poured a cup of tea and sat quietly, letting the warmth seep into my hands, the aroma filling the room. The house smelled like possibilities, polish, baked bread, and the lingering essence of all I had created. I smiled softly, knowing that this life, this freedom, this peace, was mine, fully and unapologetically. I had built my own empire. I had found my own voice. And for the first time I truly felt whole. As I sit here now, sipping my tea and listening to the quiet hum of the house I've made my own, I often think about the journey that brought me here. The years of doubt, of belittlement, of feeling invisible, they were real. And they hurt. Deeply. But what I've learned, the lesson I carry in my heart, is this: your worth is not defined by the people who fail to see it. It's not measured by the laughter, the dismissal, or the moments when others try to make you small. True worth comes from the quiet determination to keep going, to nurture your own gifts, and to believe in yourself even when the world does not. I look back at the woman I once was, quiet, hesitant, unsure, and I smile. She is still a part of me, but she has grown stronger, wiser, and braver. I hope that my story, my small triumph, can remind someone out there that it's never too late to reclaim your life, your dreams, and your power. And to those who may have been told they're useless, insignificant, or not enough, I want you to hear this: you are enough. Your ideas matter. Your voice matters. And even if the people closest to you fail to recognize it, your persistence, your creativity, and your courage will. So I ask you, dear listener, gently and sincerely, would you have the courage to stand for yourself, even when those who should support you doubt you the most? If my story touched your heart, or reminded you of the strength within yourself, I hope you'll share your own journey in the comments. Because every voice matters, and every story, just like yours, deserves to be heard.